or are suspected to be COVID positive. All right, over
Sure,
to you, Dr. Kushal. Please start
Sure,
screen sharing, Dr. Arushi. Arushi, please start. You can start screen sharing, Kushal, and present your case.
sure, sir. Good evening, everyone. Myself, Dr. Kushal Markande from MBJ Medical College, Bangalore. Recently, I finished my COVID ICU posting and I encountered a case. It was quite interesting because the patient was a 65-year-old female. 65-year-old female resident of Halasuru in Bangalore. She got admitted to us on 1st of October at 2:45 p.m. with complaints of fever since 5 days, breathlessness since 5 days, cough since 4 days, and on inquiring about her history of presenting illness further, I got to know that fever was continuous, high grade. It was documented maximum at 102 degree Fahrenheit and was relieved only. The cough was insidious in onset, intermittent, progressive, such that initially it occurred only as bouts of cough, but of late it persisted, followed by difficulty in breathing since last 3 days. The breathlessness was initially only following the bouts of cough, but was now evident since last 2 days. Now, we admitted the case with these three complaints to the moderate ward since her saturation was around 86% at room air at that time. We started her with usual COVID protocol and she was doing well only. For next 2 days, patient remained in the same condition, fever, cough and breathlessness. On the
When
third
did
day
you
of
all, Kushal, when did you all establish that she's a COVID positive patient?
the patient was established on 31st, sir. 30th of September, she was diagnosed with COVID, sir.
So she came to you with a COVID diagnosis, and you
Yes,
diagnosed.
sir.
You found that this was her presentation.
Yes, sir.
All right.
This was her fever, cough, and breathlessness, sir. So,
Okay.
with this, we admitted her to the moderate ward, sir.
Okay.
On
What is the
third
what?
day of,
How have you all divided your wards for COVID patients?
so we have divided into three categories, sir. So, there is a mild category in which we have around 50 beds. Then we have moderate category in which we have around 120 beds. Then we have one ICU in which we have total of 20 beds, bedded ICU, sir.
And you have divided these patients according to the protocols laid down by
The government, sir.
Okay. So
That ICU are protocol for mild, moderate, and severe. So that way we have divided it.
okay, very good. So
So
you
this patient
you
was
admitted.
admitted to the moderate ward, sir, since she was maintaining saturation with only 6 liters of oxygen.
Okay.
So
So
for
if I
2 days
can
we
ask
continued.
anyone else who's also treating COVID patients, is this the protocol being followed by most of the institutions, that mild, moderate, and severe? Is that how patients are being triaged and managed? I think it's a very good system that you have of dividing the wards as per the protocol and then admitting these patients. Are your patients in a dormitory-like situation, or these are separate wards?
Dormitory like, sir. Means there are wards, sir. There is an entire floor in which we have cubicles of 10 bed each.
Okay. So will anyone else like to come in and tell us about how they are managing their COVID patients? Maybe from we have a doctor from Hamdard. Irfan, if you could come in and tell us how you are admitting these patients of COVID and how you are managing or triaging them into mild, moderate, severe.
So basically, we are following ICMR guidelines, sir.
So similar to what Dr. Kushal and his team are doing.
Yes,
is that
yes, sir. It's similarly following the same condition, mild, moderate, and severe only. If there is a mild condition, if there is a patient is asymptomatic, we can be treated at the home isolation, sir, up to 17 days.
Okay. And in your, have you divided your wards also? Are they also dormitory like, or they are single rooms or?
No, sir, they are dormitory life, sir.
They are dormitory like. So it's good to know that two hospitals, one from Delhi and other from rural Karnataka, are also following ICMR guidelines and are triaging patients. So that's good standard of care. And I think a compliment to our medical systems that we are able to follow the ICMR guidelines for best practices. So I think that's very good. Would anyone else like to make a comment regarding any other ways? So in our hospital, we are a private hospital, private facility. So we have not triaged these patients like this. We have got an ICU ward, and we are actually admitting patients. As you know, in Delhi, home isolation and home quarantine is encouraged. So only moderate or severe patients come to hospital. Is that right? Do you agree, Dr. Bilal?
Yes. Definitely, as such, this patient has came with the symptoms of fever, cough, and breathlessness
With fall in saturation.
with falling saturation. So first diagnosis in this present era should be COVID. So they have done a good thing. They have segregated the patient.
No, patient came with a COVID positive report.
He came with a COVID positive report.
He came
So
with a COVID.
our triaging is like this. Mild cases are not admitted. Mostly in Delhi, the principle is home isolation unless there are multiple comorbidities. And moderate or severe patients are admitted. We do not have a dormitory system. So since we are a private hospital, patients demand single rooms, which our hospital not catered for, but many hospitals do have. So it's good to understand how the various, across the country, how the various practices are for managing these patients. All right. So anyone else would like, if there's no other comments or anything else, then please go ahead, Dr. Kushal.
Sure, sir. On day 3rd of patient's admission, that is on 3rd of October, patient started having complaints of pain in the lower abdomen, sir, which was continuous, localized in the lower abdomen only. It was dull aching, moderate grade, non-radiating, and was not relieved on analgesics or antacids. So it was also not associated with any history of loose stools, constipation, nausea, vomiting, burning sensation in the abdomen, or any other aggravating or relieving factor. Simply, patient had pain abdomen. So it was not associated with chest pain, palpitations, sweating. It was not associated with aggravation of the breathlessness or cough which pre-existed in the patient following the onset of this abdominal. There was no history of breathlessness, chest pain, or heaviness in chest on exertion present in the patient also. Although patient gave a past history of right-sided monoparesis of right upper limb, which was present since 10 months with some residual motor deficit. So with this, we examined the case. She was conscious, alert, oriented to time, place, and
Kushal,
person.
yeah. One more question. This is again a practical question.
Yes, sir.
How often and how much? How often do you all see patients in the COVID wards? Is it once a day, twice a day? What is the level of care that is given to these patients? Because we know that it's not easy to wear the entire PPE and visit these patients. And
We have
also,
around
yes, go ahead.
we have around 216 patients currently, sir, in our COVID ward. So only thrice or 4 times a day maximum we attend the patient. Others is on the basis of if there is any patient who requires continuous monitoring, that patient we can see second hourly or third hourly also.
So how long are you stationed in the COVID ward?
Sir,
Hello, Dr. Okay. Yeah. So how your posting to the COVID ward is for how many hours in a day?
for 7 weeks continuous we will be posted, and it will be around 8 hours per day, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Good to know that. Dr. Irfan, any what about y'all? How often are patients being
We have
attended?
8 hours duty, sir. 8 hours duty, morning, evening, and the night hours is 12 hours.
So do you think COVID patients are getting adequate care in your institutions or?
Yes, sir, absolutely, sir. We are getting, they are getting absolute care.
Okay, that's very good to know, because many of the institutions or hospitals are facing a lot of manpower problems, a lot of shortage of manpower and nursing problems. So it's good to know that your institutions are able to look after these patients. Importantly, many of these patients with COVID, the care that is expected or should be given is lacking because simply manpower is not there. But it's good to know that in large organizations like yours, we are having adequate patient care. Very good. So carry on,
Yes, sir.
Kushal.
Sir. So on examination, this patient was conscious, alert, oriented to time, place, and person. Her vitals, all parameters were stable except she had bradycardia. That is, her heart rate was around 56, 54 beats per minute at that time. Her saturation was similar to the previous scenario, and that is 86% at room air and 94, 95% at 6 liters of oxygen. Uh, all other systemic examination was also within normal limits. So we continued with the investigation. So we did one ECG. Since the patient had a history of monoparesis and patient had predisposition to uh, vascular, patient had old age basically, and with a background of CVA, we thought we should go for an ECG, which showed an ST elevation in lead 2-3 AVF and V3 to V6 inferolateral, which was quite a bit shocking at that time. We got an bedside ultrasound abdomen, which was completely normal. The bedside 2D echo showed regional wall motion abnormalities in the inferolateral walls. Her serial troponin I was done, which was positive for 4 consecutive days. Um, Her serum calcium was within normal limits. D-dimer and ferritin were also elevated, secondary to COVID infection per se.
Okay.
This was the ECG, which was done on first day, the day she started having symptoms. As we can see, there is ST elevation in V3 to V6
Hmm.
with corresponding reciprocal changes present.
Okay. Would anyone like to comment on the ECG? Is Dr. Seema here with us by any chance? No. Okay. Yeah. So I think clearly the ECG is showing ST elevation in the inferior and lateral leads, the coved ST segment. So the diagnosis of a recent ST elevation MI is, I think, quite warranted. How much was your troponin?
So
Do you
we
have?
did a qualitative test, sir.
Oh, you did a qualitative test. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Sir, just
We
one
didn't
question.
have the facility of a
Yes,
quantitative test.
yes. So we have our ECG expert, that is Dr. Seema Kale. Welcome, Dr. Seema. I was waiting. I was hoping that you'd come in.
No, I'm not commenting on ECG. I'm just asking whether ECG was done at the time of admission.
So I think this patient was admitted 1 day prior, and they were treating her for COVID, which she came with a positive COVID report. And I don't think on admission the ECG was done. Am I right, Dr. Kushal?
Yes, sir.
Why did you ask that question, Dr. Seema? Because
Then I just wanted to see whether her. See, I think for differentiating myocarditis will be difficult in such cases.
But what we can see is that there is a regional distribution or a territorial distribution of the ST changes, and these are typical ischemic ST elevation. So I think making a diagnosis of an inferolateral STMI is okay.
Yeah.
Troponin, as we know, of course, can be raised in COVID patients because of microangiopathic thrombosis and type 2 myocardial infarctions. But this looks like an ST elevation infarction. So I'd just like you to welcome Dr. Amit Pendarkar also, who's my colleague and also a senior cardiologist with us. And he's just finishing his OPD. You can take off your mask. Okay, he's maintaining good social distancing. So Dr. Amit, would you like to comment on the ECG? We are dealing with a COVID positive lady who has come in with a moderate symptoms, fall in saturation, and has had pain abdomen. ECG was done incidentally. They did not suspect that this is an MI because lower abdominal pain, but this was the ECG. So any
Okay,
comments?
sir. I think so. And the echo was done, or
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Echo-
Echo was done, sir.
what did the echo
Wall
show?
motion.
Wall
So
motion
echo
abnormality was
showed,
there?
yes, sir. Wall motion abnormality it showed, sir.
And so wall motion abnormality and any valvular involvement also? Did she had MR also?
Only aortic wall
Motion
sclerosis was there, sir.
Aortic wall sclerosis, and what about the ejection fraction?
Ejection fraction 56%, sir.
56%. But she did have fall in saturation. She had an
Yes, sir.
associated pneumonia also, COVID pneumonia.
So she had fallen saturation, which was similar to her pre-existing COVID pneumonia, sir. Means
Okay.
there was nothing per se related to MI at that time happened, sir.
Okay. So
She didn't
I
have
will
a fall
agree.
in saturation, sir, at the time of onset of this MI.
Okay. Okay. So the question is, I will agree with Dr. Balla sir that we have a regional wall motion. The ECG also shows territorial changes. And although myocarditis may be seen with COVID, we can get with many viral infections, we can get myocarditis. But if we have a ECG changes and wall motion abnormality in echo, and definitely we know that myocarditis will be a diagnosis of exclusion. Once we have ruled out coronary artery disease, then only we can say with conviction that it is a myocarditis.
Yes, sir.
First diagnosis will have to keep it as a coronary with an acute
As an
ischemic
ischemic event.
event.
Ischemic event, sir.
Okay.
I'll be proceeding to the next ECG, sir, of the same patient, which was done the next day.
Yes. Go ahead.
This was the next ECG, sir. My apologies for the image not being clear, but we can see that the T wave inversion, the ST elevation in V3 has now subsided. The V4, V5, V6 are also coming down, but are persistently elevated only. There are fixed T wave inversions present in the inferior lateral leads, including lead 1, 2, 3, AVF present, sir.
Dr. Seema, will you consider pericarditis in this setting with these kind of ECG evolution, ECG changes?
Difficult. Sir.
One thing I would like to share with everyone.
Voltage look like immediate also, sir. She may be underlying having
That most of the DNCs are nowadays in private ultrasound guided DNC. So these cases actually ultrasound guided curators, I think.
Sorry. Say
Hello?
that again. Sorry. Yes, Dr. Seema, you there was some interference.
the voltage in one and AVL with the TV inversion in one looks like due to LVH also.
Yes, you're right. You're right. The voltages as well as the looking at the ECG patterns in one and AVL could be LVH also, agreed. But I think the looking at the ST segment in the inferior and lateral leads cannot get away from ischemia. Okay, next.
I have one more ECG of the same patient, which was done after 2 days of this current ECG. That is on 5th of October. That is on day 4 of the event.
Okay.
This is the day 4 event ECG. As we can see here, the patient is going into here the distance between the two RR intervals is not being similar when we see on serial ECG monitorings. And the patient was going into bradycardia. Her heart rate dropped to even 50 from a baseline of 60 to 64. And following this MI event, and there were the fixed T wave inversions were reducing in amplitude on serial ECG monitorings. This was the one in which I needed your opinion, sir.
So, Dr. Seema, what do you think the ECG is looking like? Do you have a rhythm strip, Kushal?
My apologies, sir. We didn't have that.
Okay. So, definitely inferior MI. Sorry.
We had a continuous cardiac monitor, sir, which showed there is irregular rhythm, sir.
Yeah. So we know inferior MI can be accompanied by all sorts of AV blocks. And what this is looking like is that either this is, either this is something
sir.
like a Venki back phenomenon which is occurring, but without a rhythm strip, we'll be not be able to clearly, say, because they're just 2 or 3. They are just 2 or 3 beats that we are able to see in any strip. So really, it's difficult to say. If you look at the lead AVR, there seem to be some P waves here, and then this lead is without a P wave. Now, this could either be a junctional beat, or this could be, and so it's difficult to say. But clearly,
There is a P wave in lead 2 also, sir. So the ECG being a sinus,
no,
I think we can affirm on that.
No, we agree that this is a sinus rhythm, but
Yes, sir.
what is causing the variation in the RR interval needs to be seen. If you get a
Yes, sir.
proper 12 lead a rhythm strip, we'll be able to much easily make out what is going on. In the absence of that, it's hard to say. But more important than that is what was the line of management that you followed? Come to your next slide. Do you have another slide
Sure,
on
sir.
an ECG? Or? Yeah.
No, sir. These were the 3 ECGs, sir.
So more importantly than all this, what did you do?
So we took a conservative approach for the patient since we didn't have any consent for any active intervention by the attenders. They didn't want any to take any risk for the thrombolysis in the patient, sir. Neither they told for percutaneous intervention also they didn't tell, sir. So we went on with enoxaparin sodium and stat doses of aspirin, atorvastatin, and clopidogrel with Sorbitrate. With Sorbitrate, the patient improved symptomatically, and we shifted her to ICU for continuous cardiac monitoring.
So
the patient maintained.
Okay.
The
So
patient maintained.
just let me open this now for discussion. That in this setting of a COVID positive patient with an ST elevation MI, what would be the management, or how would what should be the approach? Maybe Dr. Amit can. What would have been your approach, or in our institution, what would have been the approach for this kind of a patient? So if I may sum up, Kushal, this is a patient who has developed an ST elevation MI on the basis of symptoms which were atypical, but we know that inferior MI can give rise to abdominal symptoms or these kind of pain abdomens. It may be a misleading symptom, but with the ST elevation in the inferolateral leads, reciprocal changes, rise in cardiac enzymes, and echo showing regional wall motion abnormality, this is clearly a case of acute ST elevation MI occurring in a COVID positive patient.
Yes,
Will
sir.
you agree? I think this could be the sum up of your case.
Yes, sir.
If anyone else has any other thoughts, please, you're welcome to come and say. So what are the management options for this patient for best outcomes? Let's have a discussion on that. I think that is the crux of the case right now. So Dr. Amit, please, will you like to discuss what could be the various treatment options? Is the conservative approach like this good enough, or should have a more aggressive approach been followed?
I think even before this COVID pandemic, it has always been proven that primary PCI is always better than conservative, whether it is giving only anticoagulation or thrombolysis. So definitely, but during COVID, especially in a confirmed COVID positive patient, first choice, we would have preferred to go for thrombolysis. I think thrombolysis should have been offered to the patient, and if they were ready for it, and she should have been thrombolized. if once she develops, and especially since we had if she had come with the present, I believe that she came with MI, or she was already admitted with COVID pneumonia.
She was admitted with COVID
COVID
pneumonia.
pneumonia.
Day
So-
2, she developed this.
Day
MI.
2. So we had the time. So early presentation, thrombolysis could have been could and should have been advised. But I believe that probably
And there was no major contraindication to thrombolysis. So definitive revascularization strategy or reperfusion strategy must be adopted as a default management strategy in ST elevation MI. So
Yes.
without offering a conservative approach like this is doing a disservice and not standard of care. So clearly
Yes, sir.
we have got good thrombolytic agents which can be given and should have been given. So what is the thrombolytic agent that you all use in your setting?
We have streptokinase.
Are you
here, sir.
using you have streptokinase here? Okay. So clearly, if you are able to use a fibrin specific thrombolytic agent, the outcomes are better, like tenecteplase, alteplase, or retiplase. So we'll ask Dr. Bilal. What do you think, Dr. Bilal, about various thrombolytic agents, and what do you think should have been the approach?
Yes, as Pandarkar sir has told, that this is a clear ST elevation acute inferior lateral wall MI, and I was about to see the only was the rhythm disturbance. There was no mention of whether that patient had cardiogenic shock or not. So we
Sir,
consider,
the vitals were normal, sir.
so it was a stable ST elevation MI, should have been thrombolized in the era of COVID-19. So this would have been the approach, as sir has already told. So if relatives have not agreed or for
Sir,
this
in India,
management
there is
of-
always a financial restraint, sir.
Streptokinase is not a financial restraint, I think. that is too cheap drug.
I think we may be speaking from perspective of sitting in capital of India, and maybe even in rural Karnataka, it may be a financial. Am I right, Kushal? Is that the reason why?
Definitely, sir. Definitely, sir.
Hmm.
Even
So-
for one IV cannula, I have asked people. I have seen people crying over here, sir.
So look at that. So I think very, very important insight. We in our hospital, even in COVID times, our thrombolysis rate was almost 0% before COVID. It
Sure.
became about 10 to 20% during the early days of COVID, but again has dropped to 0%. Am I right, Dr. Amit?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So we are living in I think very, very important for us to understand that even streptokinase, which none of us feel is a costly medicine, but as you're saying, so we must respect that even streptokinase can be a big challenge for some patients to afford. So what is the perspective from so someone else would like to come in from here?
Second thing I would like to ask that are these the patients who come with this symptoms of acute pneumonia, or we should now say an acute LV, this failure? Should have been an ECG done on day 0. That should have been the approach.
So definitely,
will anyone else like to tell us about the challenges that they have faced in managing, MI patients in COVID, and then we'll talk a little bit about what our strategy is over here. Also, see, this patient, ultimately what you have done is that you have kept looking at the ECGs, and suppose this patient had gone into complete AV block or into cardiogenic shock, then you're lucky that with this conservative management, the patient came out practically on her own, isn't it?
yes, sir.
So we could not
Only anticoagulation we supplemented, sir. We gave her enoxaparin sodium.
Yeah. So enoxaparin sodium is not a reperfusion strategy. You will agree?
Yes, sir. Yes,
And
sir.
should
I agree
not-
with that.
You cannot take this as a strategy for managing acute MI, at least not in 2020.
And
Definitely,
another
sir,
question,
definitely.
sir, I would like to ask, was this, as this patient was a moderate to high risk COVID positive patient, was this enoxaparin started on day 0 or it was started after seeing the ECG?
No, sir. On day 0 only it was started.
Okay.
Yeah, and one more thing I would like to ask Dr. Kushal, that before
sir.
the COVID time, and how frequently you were doing thrombolysis, and another thing is, was there any hesitation in, honestly speaking, because with COVID patients, with COVID pneumonia, in a sick patient, there is some degree of hesitation to give a drug which can have complications. So
The
there
risk
might
benefit
have been-
ratio is always evaluated, sir, prior to thrombolysis.
Yeah.
I think the good question that before COVID, in your acute MI patients, what was the percentage of patients who were not receiving thrombolysis? Can you, anyone can tell us what would you say in your setting, pre-COVID days? What was the percentage of patients not receiving thrombolysis? Was it a high percentage again because of costs and other such things, or was it low? Or could you throw some light on that? Hello, Kushal?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I can hear you, sir. So
Yeah,
out of 10 patients presenting with ST elevation MI every month to our peripheral center, we thrombolize about 4 to 5 out of them, sir, and rest of them either take a referral to Jaydeva or prefer a conservative management, citing the comorbidities and risk of thrombolysis per se.
So very important. And as all these people, okay, so very, very important and good insight that we are still in the era of streptokinase. We are still in the era of non-reperfusion therapy in our own country. And along with that, today we had a meeting of how to reduce door to balloon time for primary angioplasty patients in our hospital to below 60 minutes. So, you know, we have the whole thing happening in our country. Have you heard of
Still a dream, sir.
Yeah. Have you heard of pharmaco-invasive approach for managing acute MI? Have you heard of pharmaco-invasive approach?
Pardon, sir?
Okay, so there is a well-documented approach all over the world which combines both these modalities of managing acute MI, that is thrombolysis as well as angioplasty. This is known as pharmaco-invasive approach, and this is proved to be very successful worldwide, especially in countries all over the world. Primary angioplasty is not available freely, frequently anywhere in the world, and more so in our country. But they have laid down protocols that every patient with ST elevation MI will receive reperfusion therapy. If the person lands up at a hospital which is not PCI enabled, immediately within 30 minutes the patient will receive fibrinolytic therapy, followed by an immediate transfer to a PCI enabled hospital. Once the patient reaches the PCI enabled hospital, a specific or angiography and angioplasty is done within the next 3 to 24 hours in a planned fashion. So this is the strategy which is proved to salvage myocardium, reduce mortality, reduce complications of a large number of patients, and actually is as good as waiting. For example, your patients take a discharge and go to Jaydeva. That means they're not receiving reperfusion, but they're traveling several kilometers and spending several hours getting there and then waiting to get admitted and undergoing some angioplasty. These patients should be treated with thrombolysis, not as an option, but as it's like, for example, how does one make sure that the patients get a specific reperfusion? One is that this cost is the biggest consideration for patients. So that factor should be, that factor should be removed from the treatment modality for these patients, especially if you're giving streptokinase, and followed by a transfer to a hospital whereby they can receive primary angioplasty in a planned or a staged angioplasty in a planned fashion. Unfortunately, the reality is that these two factors, even the cost of fibrinolytic agent, the patient has to bear. And like you're saying, that out of 10 patients, only 4 or 5 can afford or are willing to undergo this treatment. So we have many long ways to travel.
Definitely.
So I suggest in your hospital management, your hospital cardiology team, and your should get together and formulate a strategy. The second part is that none of you all are calculating or know what is the mortality or morbidity of your patients whom you are treating. So it is just one patient comes, next patient goes, third patient comes, fourth patient goes. But what is the outcome of these patients are not being measured. So we don't bother about these patients. That's the sad reality.
In COVID, after the advent of COVID illness, this mortality statistics, since we have to report to government on day by day per se, so we are maintaining that. But many patients are lost to follow up. I agree with that, sir. Before, in pre-COVID era, sir.
Right. So anyone else has got would like to make any comments or like to offer any alternative management strategies to this patient, or how would we? So what are the practices that we are following? I think we can just have Dr. Amit talk about what we are able to do in a pretty large private hospital in Delhi, even in COVID times. Where are the patients received? What happens to them? And how we manage these patients. And then we'll follow that by a small discussion about best practices world over by Dr. Bilal. All right. If anyone else has no other comments, then over to Dr. Amit.
I would like to say that in the initially our practice for managing ST elevation MI has changed over as the pandemic progressed. In the beginning, similar to the other centers in the world, there was a lot of apprehension that COVID, that ST elevation MI may be a presenting feature of COVID. So initial practice was to go for a thrombolysis. But one major problem which we faced was that during COVID, a lot of patients were reluctant to come to the hospital, which has been seen all over the world. So most of the patients used to present late. So late presentation, the more chances of having complications. So we used to get many complicated MIs. So we started initially our enthusiasm for thrombolysis, which was more as Dr. Balla sir had said, that our use of thrombolytics had increased during the initial phase of the pandemic. But later on, gradually it has come down. And what we have done, we have 3 sections in our hospital. We have a confirmed section for confirmed COVID patients, then another for confirmed COVID positive, COVID negative, and for buffer zone. So what we do, our practice now at this moment is that whenever a patient of STEMI comes, we offer them primary PCI as the first choice. And if they refuse for it and they want to opt for thrombolysis, then only they are thrombolized. And we, after doing the procedure, we follow all the standard practices about which Dr. Bilal will be talking about what are the recommendations of different societies all over the world. So we are doing practically in most of the patients, and although there are limitations with COVID that the door to balloon time has increased, but we are trying to reduce it. And but as far as possible, there has not been any significant increase in door to balloon time as compared to the pre-COVID. But now we have almost gone back to the similar period as a pre-COVID, that most of our patients, almost 100% patients of STEMI, are getting primary PCI. I think Dr.
Okay. Yeah. So we are doing primary PCI for most of our patients, yes, but we have made a special corridor for receiving them from the casualty into the cath lab, and a special corridor for them to exit from the cath lab into a holding area until their COVID test is being done. So until such time, they're put in but we still have got patients who have a high complication potential, for example, in cardiogenic shock, patients with triple vessel disease, patients with resuscitated from sudden cardiac arrest. These patients we are actually managing in our main CCU at some risk to our healthcare workers. I must confess that, because in our COVID holding areas, we are not able to give them the quality of care that they deserve. And as cardiologists, we would like to salvage our patients. There have been some exposures of our medical staff also to COVID positive patients inadvertently. And some of our staff has become COVID positive also because of this exposure. This is an occupational hazard that we are all carrying or living with. And we are trying our best to come out of this. So all the procedures are done with full PPE in most instances. That's, I think, what our practice is. Anything, Dr. Bilal, if would you like to conclude this segment and then we go on to, so that's a nice picture of your patient, Kushal. Very nice. Congratulations on salvaging your patient.
Yes,
Thanks a lot,
already
sir.
sir has discussed about this STEMIs or NSTEMIs management. As sir has told, we have been divided into 3 zones where the COVID positive and COVID negative are segregated. There are patients whose reports are awaited. They are in a buffer zone. So definitely there is a risk. As sir has told, the majority of our staff working on front lines, whether in casualty or in the cath labs, have gone COVID positive. They have recovered nicely. So everything has been discussed regarding the management of this patient and overall the COVID patients. So now we will be coming to the guidelines which has been laid down by various societies for the patients.
So Kushal, can you stop your screen sharing, please? Thank you.
Sure, sir, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Dr. Bilal.
Yes, sir. So this was a pandemic which started from China, and within a span of 3-4 months, it involved whole world. So every part and parcel of life got affected. So got the medical faculty, and so got the patients we are talking about right now, the cardiac patients. So acute coronary syndromes, whether it's an ST elevation MI or a non-ST elevation MI. So presently, if we see the starts from where the patient is taken in a car, where we start the first initial loading doses or do an ECG and confirm it's a ST elevation MI, then shift the patient to the center where there are available cath labs which can go for a primary PCI. So a dedicated infrastructure and process was required for these ACS patients with COVID-19. So because the transportation invasive management should be reserved for critical patients, provided that the facility has system in place for non-transmission of coronavirus during the transportation and treatment. So if existing hospitals have units with more than 1 cath lab, so 1 cath lab should be designated for COVID positive patients or suspected patients, and the other one for the non-COVID patients.
So we have that.
We have got 2 labs. So first was we just, as sir told, we just created a corridor from where the patients can be taken to the cath lab, and we have 2 cath labs. One was designated for the COVID or suspected patients, another was kept for the non-COVID patients. So suspected diagnosed COVID patients with ACS must be clearly circulated and should be tested for diagnosis of COVID-19, must be available at facilities of ACS patients. So if we see the current recommendations for management of acute coronary syndrome, patients as yours was a confirmed COVID-19 patient. If a patient is a low risk ST elevation MI patient, if we consider low risk patients with their heart rate, their blood pressures, if the patient is having a VT or a patient is in cardiogenic shock, these will be the high risk patients. If patient does not have that, we can categorize them as low risk and should be considered for thrombolysis as a first treatment choice. If they do not respond to thrombolysis or patient develops some complication, then we can think of, as sir has told, pharmacoinvasive therapy for a rescue PCI. Whether if a patient is a high risk patient, he is already in cardiogenic shock, or patient who is having primary VTs, then the patient should be taken directly to the cath lab. And in this facility, we should have a dresses, PPEs available, and the hospital should have a designated cath lab for the consideration of these COVID positive patients of primary PCI. In other situations, if these things are not available, then we can again think of primary thrombolysis. So if patients are suspected patients who do not have their reports of COVID-19, then STEMI should be thrombolized as a first choice, like should be taken as a confirmed COVID-19 case. So NSTEMIs should be put on conservative management, as you have put this patient, should be put on a conservative management, and afterwards should be taken for a cath lab once patient is COVID-free, infection-free. So patients with COVID-19 should be taken into consideration. They might have a thrombocytopenia. So before deciding for a revascularization by thrombolysis or for primary angioplasty, thrombocytopenia should be taken into consideration. So we should also be knowing the contraindications of thrombolysis. There are absolute contraindications, patient having intracranial bleed, or there are some malformation aneurysms, some large neoplasms in brain, previous history of stroke, suspected aortic dissection, or history of recent surgery or head trauma or bleeding diastasis. There are relative contraindications. One is age, above 75, or patient is on anticoagulants, patient is pregnant, or have cardiopulmonary resuscitation for more than 10 minutes, or there is a chance of intracranial bleed, or patient having uncontrolled hypertension or remote ischemic stroke, or there is major surgery that has happened within 3 weeks. So this is these are the concerns for management of ST elevation MI patients with COVID-19. So consensus of the optimal management of STEMI. Is there a high suspicion of concomitant COVID-19 infection? As your patient presented with fever, if her report was not available, she presented with fever, she presented with cough. So this was a high risk concomitant patient for COVID-19 infection. So if there is no such history, then treat them as an ACS guidelines. If there is a history of all these concomitant COVID-19 infection suspicion, are we facing an acute thrombotic coronary occlusion? No, treat properly. If yes, then we can think of first, if there is low risk patient, as we already discussed, then think of fibrinolytic therapy. One sir has just already discussed, if patient takes time to reach a primary PCI center, then we should thrombolize him or her first, then can take for a rescue PCI. Or is there are any contraindication to thrombolysis? And then we have to look of a proper PCI center where COVID-19 patient can be managed, and there should be less exposure to the patient in this health staff. Second is this
Primary PCI.
This is primary PCI. Primary PCI should be considered in patients where their door to balloon time or door to device time is less than 90 minutes. There are cath labs which have designated negative cath lab, negative pressures, where spread of COVID-19 should be less. And there we have seen this is a difficult time for cardiologists, where manipulation of guide wires or the taking out the procedures in cath lab with PP is very difficult, and more exposure to staff is there. So there are thought of a robotic assisted primary PCI, where the less exposure to staff and more experience in these fields are required. So all patients should initiate a medical treatment according to ACS guidelines.
Hello, someone's should be muted. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Click.
Yes. Okay.
So this is the algorithm for patients with STEMI and who are admitted in intensive care units. STEMI, there's a medical history or epidemiological history. The body temperature is measured, ECG, lung CT. We rightly do X-ray chest and take blood samples. So there is a confirmed, if we see the grade 3, there's a confirmed COVID or suspected patient. So yes, the indication for thrombolysis is there, so thrombolize the patient. So immediately thrombolize the patient, put this patient into an ICU quarantine. Once the report is there, then we can take the patient for further management. So if there is no this contraindication for thrombolysis, then patient should be put on OMT, optimal medical therapy, as the patient should be again quarantined in some separate ward until and unless his COVID report comes. And second grade, these are the ESC guidelines. And the grade 2 is patients cannot be ruled out temporarily. So they can be, there is a suspicion, but the patient do not have risk factor, these symptoms of COVID-19. So indication for thrombolysis there, yes, there's an ST elevation MI, immediately thrombolize, again quarantine this patient in some segregated ward until his COVID report comes out, and he can be or she can be taken for a rescue PCI. And there is a contraindication, no contraindication for this thrombolysis, or there is a failed this thrombolysis, then patient can be taken for primary PCI with all precautions of COVID-19. So grade 1 is patients who are ruled out, who are not COVID positive. Again, the management will be same. They should be taken to primary cath labs, and a primary PCI should be done, and these patients should be kept in a ICCU or CCU. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the sort of challenges that we are facing in patients of COVID-19 in the COVID-19 era, in whom we are able to, in whom we have to manage an acute situation like an acute MI. Being as cardiologists, we are still taking these patients into the cath lab, like I told you, in our hospital. But this, whether we are able to offer them or our healthcare workers, we are exposing to this problem. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Like Dr. Pendarkar, my colleague, said that in the initial days, we did start thrombolizing some patients, but we could not, as cardiologists, now we are born and brought up in the primary angioplasty era. Any results that are less than optimal, less than perfect, not acceptable to us. And losing a patient out of a complication of acute MI by an arrhythmia or by AV block or by progressive cardiogenic shock, again, is not acceptable to us. Maybe in the initial days, we were all very scared or worried about contracting COVID-19 and facing this problem. But somehow, I think over the last 6 months, we've gotten over this fear. We do take whatever precautions we can. We do try to minimize the exposure to our staff. We do try to hold these patients in an interim area until they become negative and then shift them out. But like I said, 5 days ago, Dr. Pendarkar had a patient who had multiple VTs inside the cath lab. He was in cardiogenic shock, he was on IABP, he was on ventilator, and a primary PCI was done. And so this patient was managed in the normal ICCU, knowing fully well that he could possibly turn out to be COVID positive. So somehow this is the price that we do pay as healthcare workers who care for our patients. But in a more realistic fashion, possibly the best practice will be that you assess the risk of the patient, even with an ST elevation MI. So those who have got large anterior MIs, those who have got inferior MI with complication, those who are in shock, try to do more aggressive management. Those who can be less should be treated with thrombolysis and then triaged into. And in centers where primary PCI is not available, I strongly urge that pharmaco-invasive therapy should be standard of care, and no patient should not receive reperfusion therapy for any reason whatsoever in India. So those, I think, will be my last words. Will anyone else like to say some? Yes, Kushal, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Sir, in rural settings, sir, what better we can do when patients are not that educated about the care per se? They are not affordable for the treatment per se. When we give them an offer to referral to a PCI enabled center, they're not willing to go there also because they are scared of finances which are accompanied with the treatment, or they are scared with the complications associated with the treatment per se.
Right. So these are very valid points. So, I am part of a group which some other doctors might be aware, that is associated or mainly looking at how acute MI is managed across the world. And I have attended many such meetings. My crux of my understanding is that this is all, I'll tell you how it happens in the United States of America, USA, which has set the standard for all of us and which we try to emulate or follow. First thing they have done is that acute myocardial infarction is declared as a life-threatening emergency. All right. So management by angioplasty or does not require any consent or any waiting by anyone. All right. It's like trauma. It's a life-threatening emergency. Patients have to be managed by best practices, number one. Secondly, everyone is covered by some insurance or the other. So there's no question of anyone paying cash upfront. So you can do these things like door to balloon time, put the patient in one ambulance, transfer to another ambulance, this and that, because all the money transaction is taken at the back end between the insurance provider and the hospital. Patient upfront does not have to pay. So these are certain regulatory and certain things that have been taken up by the society, by the government, pushed by very proactive professional bodies and for the greater benefit of their public. Unfortunately, in our country, like you are practicing, even thrombolysis is such a challenge. So we have a very, very long way to go. There is a STEMI India program being run in Tamil Nadu, whereby which actually started or was based out of the group that I'm a part of, which started by having a hub and spoke arrangement that patients who presented to any peripheral hospital were thrombolized, and then they were transferred through ambulances, state-owned ambulances, to a hub hospital where they then underwent angioplasty. So this has been possible because the government has a very good insurance scheme amongst all the citizens of Tamil Nadu, and there's no payment that is being done by the patient upfront. So once you have to have these kind of schemes, and so this is a problem that is much more than simply us doctors sitting together. It's a social, economic, administrative challenge which needs to be taken up at that level, and all multiple modalities are involved in having better outcomes. Until then, all the best with streptokinase and lack of streptokinase to your patients. I'm sorry, but this is the reality that is facing.
I accept it, sir.
No, it's not your fault or not your. We salute you people who are working under such constraints and still trying to give good outcomes to patients. And I'd like to conclude by saying that ours is still the noblest profession in the world. I've told you what our example is. I'm sure each one of the people who are attending here and so many others are putting ourselves at risk for our patients just to make sure that they have a better outcome. That is our job. So with these words, if there are no other comments, observations and all, would like to conclude this session of Cardiology Echo. And thank you all, and especially to Kushal for presenting your case, very interesting. And to my two colleagues, that is Dr. Bilal and Dr. Pendarkar, for helping in comments. And look forward to meeting you all again in another session of Cardiology Echo. So thank you very much, and have a good day and a good evening.